Today's lesson is for January the 7th, 2018. The title of this lesson is called A Sincere Faith. The scripture for this lesson is Daniel chapter 1, verses 8 through 21. Suggested read is Daniel chapter 1, 1 through 21. I'm going to start with verses 1 through 21, and I'm going to give commentary for 8 through 21. Okay, starting with chapter 1, verses 1.
Daniel in Nebuchadnezzar's court. During the third year of King Jehoiakim's reign in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave him victory over King Jehoiakim of Judah and permitted him to take some of the sacred objects from the temple of God. So Nebuchadnezzar took them back to the land of Babylonia and placed them in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief of staff, to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. Select only strong, healthy, and good-looking young men, he said. Make sure they are well-versed in every branch of learning, are gifted with knowledge and good judgment, and are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. The king assigned them a daily ration of food and wine from his own kitchens. They were to be trained for 3 years, and then they would enter the royal service. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were 4 of the young men chosen, all from the tribe of Judah. The chief of staff renamed them with these Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belteshazzar. Hananiah was called Shadrach. Mishael was called Meshach. Azariah was called Abednego.
Okay, this is being read from the New Living Translation. The scripture text should be in the description box of this video. Okay, we're going to read verse 8. But Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to them by the king. He asked the chief of staff for permission not to eat these unacceptable foods. Verse 9. Now God had given the chief of staff both respect and affection for Daniel. But he responded, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has ordered that you eat this food and wine. If you become pale and thin compared to the other youths your age, I'm afraid the king will have me beheaded. Okay, I'm going to read commentary from verses 8 and verses 9. Daniel resolved not to eat this food, either because it was forbidden by Jewish law, such as pork, see Leviticus 11, or because accepting the king's food and drink was the first step towards depending on his gifts and favors. Although Daniel was in a culture that did not honor God, he still obeyed God's law. Daniel was determined to be devoted to principle and to be committed to a course of action. When Daniel made up his mind not to defile himself, he was being true to a lifelong determination to deal with what was right and not give in to the pressures around him. We too are often assaulted by pressures to compromise our standards and live more like the world around us. Merely wanting or preferring God's will and way is not enough to stand against the onslaught of temptation. Like Daniel, we must resolve to obey only God. It's easier to resist temptation if you have thought through your convictions before the temptation arises. Daniel and his friends made their decision to be faithful to the laws of God before they were faced with the king's delicacies. So they did not hesitate to stick with their convictions. We will get into trouble if we have not previously decided where to draw the line. Before such situations arise, decide on your commitments and what you will do. Then, when the temptation comes, you will be ready to say no. I'm going to repeat that. Then, when temptation comes, you will be ready to say no. Commentary from verse 9. God moved with an unseen hand to change the heart of this Babylonian official. The strong moral conviction of these 4 young men made an impact. God promised to be with his people in times of trial and temptation. Psalms 106, verse 46, Isaiah 43, verses 2 through 5, and 1 Corinthians 10:13. His active intervention often comes just when we take a stand for him. Stand for God and trust him to protect you in ways you may not be able to see. Reading commentary from verse 10. Anything short of complete obedience meant execution for the officials who served Nebuchadnezzar. Even in such a small matter as this, the official feared for his life. Chapter 11.
Daniel spoke with the attendant who had been appointed by the chief of staff to look after Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Please test us for 10 days on a diet of vegetables and water, Daniel said.
A commentary from verse 12. The Babylonians were trying to change their thinking by giving them a Babylonian education, their loyalty by changing their names, and their lifestyle by changing their diet. Without compromising, Daniel found a way to live by God's standard in a culture that did not honor God. Wisely choosing to negotiate rather than rebel, Daniel suggested an experimental 10-day diet of vegetables and water instead of the royal foods and wine the king offered. Without compromising, Daniel quickly thought of a practical, creative solution that saved his life and the lives of his companions. As God's people, we may adjust to our culture as long as we do not compromise God's laws. Chapter 13 through 17.
At the end of the 10 days, see how we look compared to the other young men who are eating the king's food. Then make your decision in light of what you see. The attendant agreed to Daniel's suggestion and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, Daniel and his 3 friends looked healthier and better nourished than the young men who had been eating the food assigned by the king. So after that, the attendant fed them only vegetables instead of the food and wine provided for the others. God gave these 4 young men an unusual aptitude for understanding every aspect of literature and wisdom, and God gave Daniel the special ability to interpret the meanings of visions and dreams.
Okay, reading commentary from verse 17. Daniel and his friends learned all they could about new culture so they can do their work with excellence. But while they learned, they maintained steadfast allegiance to God, and God gave them skill and wisdom. Culture need not be God's enemy. If it does not violate his commands, it can aid in accomplishing his purpose. We who follow God are free to be competent leaders in our culture, but we are required to pledge our allegiance to God first.
When the training period ordered by the king was completed, the chief of staff brought all the young men to King Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and no one impressed him as much as Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the royal service. Whenever the king consulted them in any manner requiring wisdom and balanced judgment, he found them 10 times more capable than any of the magicians and enchanters in his entire kingdom. Daniel remained in the royal service until the first year of the reign of King Cyrus.
Reading commentary from verse 20 through 21. Nebuchadnezzar put Daniel and his friends on his staff of advisors. This staff included many magicians and enchanters. These were astrologers who claimed to be able to tell the future through occult practices. They were masters at communicating their message so that it sounded authoritative, as though it came directly from their gods. In addition to knowledge, Daniel and his 3 friends had wisdom and understanding given to them by God. Thus, the king was far more pleased with them than with his magicians and enchanters. As we serve others, we must not only merely pretend to have God's wisdom. Our wisdom will be genuine when we are rightly related to God. How did the captives survive in a foreign culture? They learned about the culture, achieved excellence in their work, served the people, prayed for God's help, and maintained their integrity. We may feel like foreigners whenever we experience change. Alien cultures come in many forms, like a new job, a new school, a new neighborhood, a new environment. We can use the same principles to help us adapt to our new surroundings without abandoning God. Daniel was one of the first captives taken by Babylon, and he lived to see the first exiles return to Jerusalem in 538 BC. Throughout this time, Daniel honored God, and God honored him. While serving as an advisor to the kings of Babylon, Daniel was God's spokesman to the Babylonian Empire. Babylon was a wicked nation, but it would have been much worse without Daniel's influence. That concludes this Sunday school lesson. Don't forget to rate, comment, and hit that subscribe button. Hope you enjoyed.